Last week, we received an email informing us that senior investigative reporter Marc Fitch and CII have been named a finalist for the SPN Powerful Storytelling Award. Marc was named a finalist for his coverage of mental health in Connecticut, specifically 3 powerful investigations he has written in the last year, which I'll link below. As a finalist, we have until June 30th to get as many votes as possible from the public. You should, of course, click on the link right now to vote for Marc, but if you are still on the fence, here are a few snippets from a brief sit-down interview I did with Marc to give you more reasons to cast your vote for him. What is the state of mental health care in Connecticut?
The state of mental health care in Connecticut it's basically been pushed off a cliff. And this happened across the country. I think we saw this during the COVID-19 pandemic. Mental health care in Connecticut had been hanging on by a thread, and essentially the COVID-19 pandemic broke it. But decades of budget problems, deficits, led to Connecticut cutting a lot of those mental health programs. I mean, to the point where when Connecticut finally closed its last major, inpatient residential area, they were supposed to take the money that they saved from closing this place and put it into community mental health care. They never did that. There's even a coalition called Keep the Promise that is a group of mental health nonprofits that are in Connecticut to keep its promise to fund community mental health programs in light of shutting down that massive facility. And it is yet to come to fruition. So following the COVID-19 pandemic in 2021, lawmakers made mental health some of their top priorities. They passed a slew of major mental health bills and kind of left it there. Some of those things have not really worked out, and even those that do work out, it's going to take a long time. So Connecticut is trying to do better. Unfortunately, they let it get to a place where it teetered on the brink and then fell off that cliff.
I guess that relates directly to, it sounds like, the personal passion that you have for it, but could you share a little more about why you chose to dig into these stories?
Well, prior to my becoming a journalist, and even up through part of my career as a journalist, I worked in inpatient psychiatric care for about 12 years. So these are locked psychiatric wards, and I was a mental health worker. And I saw the inside of the system. I know exactly what a stay at a psychiatric hospital is like for patients and what it's like for the staff. And in working that, what I really saw was a revolving door. The same people come in and out and in and out. And while there are social services in the community for some of these people, a lot of it just falls by the wayside, and people fall through the cracks and they end up right back where they started again. And when you go into a psychiatric unit, it's not like going into a regular hospital for a broken arm or broken leg. You are locked there. You cannot leave. You cannot sign out against medical advice. There are a lot of things that patients have to orient themselves to when they come onto a unit, and things that they don't understand. It's not a hotel stay. It's sometimes more like a prison stay. And those places, people, I worked with patients who had been on those units, and we're talking, 30 beds, maybe 1 floor of a hospital, sat there for 6-9 months even. A lot of this falls back on the taxpayer. It can be $5,000 to $7,000 a day to house somebody in a hospital psychiatric unit. So yeah, that money adds up really quick. And the people's perception of what a therapeutic environment is probably does not line up with what exists in a locked psychiatric unit, where the primary purpose is to keep you from harming yourself or keep you from harming anyone else. So yes, I did have quite a bit of background in this. And when this particular family came to Connecticut Inside Investigator and said, hey, listen, our 13-year-old daughter went through this system, and she went in there for suicidal ideation. They kept her for a few days. They pushed her back out, and she tried to kill herself. I've heard that story, I don't know how many times in the course of my work. But this family was willing to come forward. They were willing to tell their story. And I thought it was a story that should be told, because particularly when it comes to the youth in Connecticut, there needs to be more services for them. They need to have those outlets where they can go, where it's not necessarily a place that's going to create more stress or make it worse on them.
This is something that you've handled now in 3 deep dive investigations spanning upwards of 15,000 words. You've written about this topic in a number of news items as well, kind of covering the day-to-day of how this is being handled in the legislature and in communities. Is this a topic that you plan to continue covering? And if so, how can the public help you do so?
Oh, absolutely. I plan to continue covering it. We have a great community of mental health nonprofits here in Connecticut. We have a great community of people who are willing to speak out on this subject. And I mean, even recently, the Connecticut's Department of Mental Health Services issued a request for proposals to create a peer-run respite house. Unfortunately, they didn't listen to any of the people who have actually ever run peer respite houses, and their request for proposals included a bunch of things that just aren't going to work, and really kind of disappointed the mental health community. So that was a topic I covered just recently. So, while politicians and state agencies say they want to help and want to listen, when the rubber meets the road, they're more often doubling down on the same practices that they've done in the past, as opposed to opening themselves up to the possibility of new and different ideas in the future. So as this progresses, as that particular storyline progresses, I'll be covering it. And, if more people want to come forward with their stories, I will absolutely listen, and I will absolutely give it due consideration to cover. So, obviously, we do our due diligence in fact checking, and we are extremely conscientious of protecting people's identities so that they are not exposed in any way. So yes, I will definitely continue to cover this subject.
Marc is a talented writer, and we commend him for reaching this final voting round. Please support his work to improve mental health in Connecticut by clicking on the voting link and casting your vote for Yankee Institute. Connecticut Inside Investigator exposes opportunities for mental health reform in the Powerful Storytelling Award category.